Hi, my name is Kofi Hunt. I'm here with our Rent Too Damn High town hall. We're here to talk about what's going on here in we have here today, we have City Council Member Oliver, Safety Tenants Emmanuel with the Liberation and Generation. Um, Emmanuel is going to kick us off, starting about basically what this idea of guaranteed or inclusive housing.
Sure. Thank you, Kofi. And thank you, everyone. And again, thank you, Kofi, for organizing today's event. As you mentioned, I'm with Liberation Generation, and we've been working together over the last 6 months around this idea of guaranteed housing or inclusive housing, which I'll share a little bit in a moment. But I think what I wanted to do before the conversation passes to Carlo and the council member is I wanted to provide a little bit of kind of a high level table setting um, for the provide some context for the discussion that will follow around some of the state challenges and outcomes of our current housing market. And some of them, obviously, I'm not going to capture all of them. But first, a little bit of background about Liberation Generation. We're a Black-led organization that's been around for about 5 years. We were founded by our co-founders and co-executive directors, Lana Rice and Jeremy Greer, to be in service of grassroots organizations and the movement of those doing the work of organizing, advocating, and advancing issues in service of communities of color. And so at LibGen, we're focused on dismantling what we call the oppression economy, which is how we view and talk about the current economy that we have, where we see racism being profitable or used for profit, and that leads to a cycle that depresses the economic, political vitality of people of color. And the way we're kind of trying to tackle this current economy is by working to end the criminalization of people of color, the political suppression of people of color, the dual financial system, and the concentration of corporate power. And in the place of this economy, we aim and hope to build what we call a liberation economy. It's an economy where all people of color have their basic needs met, have safety and security, are valued, value, and belong. And so, at the root of collaboration, cooperation, we work with advocates, community organizers, leaders of color throughout the country to really work to build this economy, this new economy that we achieve ideally in one generation, which is called liberation generation. And so we do this through three ways. One is developing and pushing transformative policies. Two, it's working with grassroots partners to really build up their capacity and support them in the efforts that they're doing on the ground through a range of offerings. And then three, it's spreading and shaping a worldview narrative change, really just changing the way that we think about the economy, we speak about the economy, write about the economy, and how it works. Now, to kind of moving on to some of the kind of statistics, I wanted to kind of offer 6 points just to kind of anchor some of the discussion here and really kind of drive home the point of some of the realities, which are lost on many people, obviously, especially if you're a renter in these markets, or even a homeowner or anyone else working on housing. But the first thing I wanted to note is that people of color, renters, or renters of color are disproportionately cost burdened. Many of our communities are paying 30, 40, 50% or more of their income. Their income on rent alone, right? This is true at the national level, and it's true. The second thing I wanted to note is that there's no state in the country that has enough affordable housing that is affordable and available for extremely low income households. And in fact, there's really no state, no county, no metro area, nowhere that minimum wage worker, a full-time minimum wage worker can afford a modest two-bedroom apartment at fair market rent. And then nationally, the shortage of homes for low-income households or extremely low-income households amounts to 7 million homes. And in places, Florida is among the handful of states. Florida, Texas, California, Nevada, New Mexico is among the states with the fewest available homes that are affordable and available. The third thing I wanted to note is that renters, particularly Black renters, are much more likely to face evictions nearly 1 in 4 renters live in a county where the black eviction rate is double that for white eviction. Overall, black eviction and women in particular are disproportionately threatened with eviction and disproportionately evicted. The fourth thing I wanted to note is that far fewer people of color own their homes. And adding to this, even when people do own their homes, the value of the homes tend to be much lower. And you see this in neighborhoods where the share of the population, if it's over 50% black, those homes tend to be valued about half the value of neighborhoods where there are no black residents. And you see this more kind of anecdotally in stories of black homeowners in particular have basically whitewash their home because of the fair shake in their appraisals or in their ability to sell their homes to really generate that homeownership culture. And the fifth statistic I wanted to just cover is that it's one of many outcomes of this market that we have now, which is that the homeless population is disproportionately made up of black and brown people. And in fact, even though black people make up 13% of the U.S. population and 21% of those living in poverty, they account for 37% of all homeless people and over 50% of homeless families with children. Hispanic people make up about 28% of the population of all homeless people, even though they make up just about 19% of the population. Now, the last thing I wanted to know is not a statistic, but it's just really kind of rounding out things, just to get into kind of feed into the discussion about why things are so bad and hopefully how we can kind of right some of these issues. And part of this has to do with housing assistance to go around, housing and other forms of home assistance or rental assistance to not be enough to be insufficient to meet the needs that are out there. It also has something to do with the inability or the unwillingness of the private market to create truly affordable housing for a whole host of reasons. And that also in many of our markets, particularly in hot markets, major metro areas, you're seeing a lot of private investment, a lot of huge corporations coming in, buying up homes, properties, lots, and turning around and using market power that economic power to squeeze renters a little bit. But really, I think what it comes down to is that a lot of our public policies and institutions, our governments, local, state, federal, have neglected to invest in affordable housing and/or intentionally made it harder to do so. In Florida, and at the same time, despite the fact that this is a reality and that we see this in many of our governments, particularly in more conservative areas, public institutions still hold the greatest opportunity to be able to kind of right some of these wrongs. They have the most power, they have the most resources, they have the most reach to be able to kind of reset the market in many ways. And so for LibGen, this is part of the reason that we've been working with Kofi and we've been part of this national campaign around pushing for a home guarantee. And what this is, trying to reset the conditions so that tenants are provided with new rights, protections through a national bill of rights or a local bill of rights or state level bill of rights, where tenants are afforded specific types of support, including right to counsel, where we can not only rehab our existing public housing stock, but we can really build new units, something that federal law has prohibited. New units of public housing, something that federal law has prohibited since 1996. And finally, create new forms of public housing like social or inclusive housing that is publicly owned, that is community controlled, that really serves the needs that are out there and doesn't perpetuate the same inequities, the same outcomes that we see in the market. But ultimately, this housing crisis that we face can't be solved with private investment alone, which is why the public sector and public policy is so critical for resetting the market that is failing so many of our communities. So with that, I'll pass it to Kofi.
Thank you. And one other panelist joining us is Aaron Dietrich. We're going to hear him speak a little bit about housing in
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right, cool.
So we have Aaron Dietrich here joining us, our Rents to damn high town hall to talk about inclusive housing. It's also been called guaranteed housing. So it's starting off just asking you, Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself a little, talk
Yeah,
about your work,
sure.
your background?
I mean, I don't need to introduce myself to you, Kofi. We've been organizing in Pinellas County. Like I saw you organizing what back in 2012, started organizing in the community around labor. And I think the reason that I'm talking today is just because a lot of people that worked in the community in St. Pete came together around a housing crisis that I think is still in full effect. I'm out in California now just because of personal consequences and needs, and um, you know, I'm a labor community organizer who had the experience of working in housing, and it forever changed how I approach organizing in any way moving forward in my life and career.
Okay, thank you. Yes, excellent. And yeah, we worked together a long time. Always appreciate you. And I've learned so much from you.
So,
Um, could you tell me, like, because you did work in St. Pete, Pinellas County, but you could even say broadly because you do have experiences on the West Coast now. But like, why don't we have broadly like guaranteed housing?
yeah, I think the organizing that we did in St. Pete revealed to me that like it's almost an intractable issue. It's viewed as such. Um, there are a lot of interests involved, and kind of basic common sense solutions just don't even get the space to be discussed. Um, I think that, frankly, like there is nobody that's responsible for housing. Um, the government doesn't, the city council, there's not the local government, the federal government does not view it as a responsibility to provide us housing. Um, the only people we're really left with to do that is the marketplace. And um, I think we're in a time where people have not been able to figure out like who's responsible for doing this. I mean, like I've worked in the city where literally we know who's responsible for taking out trash, providing water to your house. Who's responsible for the roads? Who's responsible for housing? And that's just a question that keeps coming up as you see friends and family and community, forced to live on the street and leave and be displaced. Um, I think fundamentally we haven't gotten this because practical solutions aren't being discussed because we haven't had a clear demand, like as a people, as a community, of who's responsible for housing. And I think it's time for us as organizers and people to drive that question until we get a damn answer. And that means forcing people to say it's not me or it is me. Because right now, all that we're told is that the private market is responsible for it, but they don't listen to us. They're only making housing for people of a certain income. So I think it's a problem because there's people that aren't taking responsibility for it.
Okay.
And so thank you. We're back here. So I'm going to come to our panel here, and ask why do you think we have
So I just listened to that clip of Aaron, and is the microphone okay? I think that, the part about the landlord class, the realtor class, consolidating their power, I think that's the biggest thing. They are consolidated in these trade groups. Like locally, we have the Bay Area Apartment Association, we have the Pinellas Realtors Organization, we have the Chamber of Commerce, the local Chamber of Commerce, and all of these trade groups that are, who profit off of housing. They're organizing together. They are connected to much larger trade groups at the national level who advocate for neoliberal policies that actually just loosen any regulations there are on housing and make it easier for them to profit. So what's happening in St. Pete with the housing crisis, it's not particular to St. Pete. It's the idea of housing being used as an investment vehicle. And I think that what Aaron said was interesting about how we're not, as a people, we're not united around the need for housing. We're not organized around the need for housing, and there's a lot of different fingers that are pointed because a lot of people, a lot of our culture is, the whole pull yourself up by your bootstraps, individual responsibility. If you're in a bad situation, it's your fault pretty much. And I think that one of the most important things to building a movement around housing is to knock down that shame that exists around poor housing conditions and homelessness, because that only benefits the ruling class and the people who make these policies and who, like Emmanuel mentioned, are working rapidly to criminalize homelessness right now. In Florida, we just saw that, Ron DeSantis essentially made it illegal to sleep on the streets. The Supreme Court reaffirmed that, and that's what our local government has been doing for decades now here in St. Pete, is criminalizing homelessness. So putting more money into the police to, kick people off the streets and put them in the jails. And so this is both political parties doing this, the Democrats and the Republicans. So none of, when we look at, who can save us, it's ourselves. It's the working class people, the tenants, the working class homeowners who have to come together and organize around this, because, the reason that the ruling class is so successful is because of what I said at the beginning, which is their trade groups, their organization. And there's something that Malcolm X said that I always come back to, which is that we're not outnumbered, we're out organized. Like, we are the vast majority. And so, it's definitely the trade groups, and then the corruption of the politicians who, it's like Aaron said, they don't see any responsibility in providing people housing. The local politicians are completely corrupt. Not you, Brother John, but the other ones. Like Ken Welch, for example, with the Tropicana Field deal, took over $50,000 from the Rays, and now we're seeing a massive corporate giveaway to them so they can make their stadium and also redevelop the whole area, which will further drive property values up, and which will drive the rents up. So a continuation of these same policies, essentially, like shrinking the role of the public sector, which you mentioned earlier, and then allowing the private sector to do whatever they want. So that's what's been happening in St. Pete, and um, that's what's been happening all around the country.
The question is, why don't we have security housing?
paint. You know, there's other things that are needed, even if you know how to fish. You still have to have some support. Needs at home. But if you think that, okay, well, you work hard, you know, have a whole lot, it's gonna be this is how they're set up in a way that are designed for people. We really have to have a fight. The protein of people. Last thing I say he was hungry. Shelter. I mean, for how we treat.
And so yeah, I started to see that y'all picking up what I wanted to ask, which is like essentially now we talked about like, why we don't have it, but next part, what would need to happen for it to have guaranteed housing equity. So I'll allow you to expand on that with us.
Yeah, so I think it comes down to power because the landlords have power, the capitalists have power right now. They have state power. Like they control all the politicians, they control the policies, they control the police. Because if you're getting evicted, they can call the police on you to throw you out. But why is it that we can't call the police when if someone's trying to throw us out of our home? Like that is what really needs to change is the power. And so I think the first thing with building power is making sure that people are in the proper conditions to be able to organize. And so what that means like to me right now is like getting these policies that allow tenants to be in better footing to make a fight. Like what you were saying about right to counsel. Like right to counsel is one of the most important policies. Like ensuring that people who are facing eviction have access to a lawyer. Because when you're facing eviction, that is what makes the difference, really, if you have a lawyer or not. And lawyers are expensive. And so like you look at it like with evictions and it's like less than 5% of the people facing eviction have lawyers, but then like over 90% of the landlords, they always have a lawyer. And so fighting for policies that immediately make things easier for tenants. So right to counsel, things like making it so people don't have to say if they're a felon when they're trying to get housing. Um, Making it so that landlords have to rehouse tenants if there's a natural disaster because they don't have to do that right now. They can't. They do in Miami though, and that happened after Surfside. I don't remember which year Surfside happened, but it was in the last few years. It was like a huge condo collapsing in Miami, and then the county of Miami passed that. So fighting for things like that in the short term, and also building tenants organizations that can put up a fight and defend tenants when they're getting evicted, when like what's happening in Altamar right now in St. Pete, over 40 people don't have AC right now. Over 40 people in the summer because, like I said earlier, the laws are written against us, and landlords aren't required to provide AC in Florida. It's ridiculous. And so, building organizations that are able to push landlords to act immediately to prevent evictions, to prevent outrageous rent increases, and building power through eventually like rent strikes, like petitions, however tenants want to organize to shift the power from the landlord to that like the people in the actual building having control over their own housing situation. So it's like there's like multiple things that I'm saying here, like pushing for these policies to make it easier, organizing tenants to gain power, because we know the policies that we need. We know that we need public housing, like a massive expansion in public housing. But in my opinion, the way that we're going to get there is building grassroots power from tenants, from working class homeowners, and so that we actually have the power to shape what we do with our resources. Because, for example, if we had a say, would we have given all that money to the copycat field? No, no, it was deeply unpopular, and that's why they didn't want it to be a referendum, because these people are anti-democratic. So also that pushing for more democratic measures, like what we were doing with when we were fighting for rent control, we were originally pushing for the city to give us a referendum for a state of emergency. It was this whole process because it was basically already illegal in Florida, but we were pushing this process that we knew was legal. That would have been a democratic process. And then DeSantis, the very next year, 2023, he made it illegal through the Live Local Act. Fully just made rent control illegal. And that law also gave a bunch of tax breaks to developers. So, yeah, I said a lot, but I think y'all get what I'm saying.
Involving, like using the democratic process. Absolutely. And really identify politicians, public servants, like who you like, giving them the support that they need in order to get into office, get into office, provide them that support. When I was appointed in October, pretty contentious, but we were able to get it passed in early January. Then in July, we had to vote to repeal it because the state of Florida said everything that we had organized for and did to protect tenants, it became illegal in the state of Florida. And they said that we could no longer regulate, tenant or landlord and tenant relationships, except in cases where, there's a contract in place, like with, the Tropicana Field and historic gas plant. But if there's no contract between the city and the developer, then the state of Florida says that we legally can't enforce any of these protections that we had. So that was one of the blows for me, is like doing this work for 3 or 4 years to get it to a place where, seeing it, I had this moment where I was like, oh yeah, I'm full circle. Like I'm actually voting on something that I organized around, and it was like all happy and excited. And then, 5 months later, the state of Florida was like, okay, yeah, that was cute, but we're not doing that. We're not helping people in the way that you all want to help people. And so it really speaks to the need for democratic processes. And the other thing I think is the zoning, like really being able to change the zoning to allow it. I think requiring residential developments to include a certain percentage of affordable units is something that we can do and that we need to be pushing for. But it's tricky because we're here in Florida, and so like any development that comes to us that we're voting for, being able to require them to have a percentage of affordable units would be something helpful within the law, of course. Having sustained funding sources for it, because the other piece, and really, again, it's all like fundamental stuff, but like really changing the way we do the budget. And when we talk about like public safety as a percentage of the budget, it's 55% of the budget right now, where housing is, about 2.5% of the budget. And so looking at our priorities, and when I say public safety, that's including fire and those things. So if we really get down into the nitty gritty, start talking about policing, it's probably like 25% of the budget specifically for policing. But we still see this imbalance in the amount of dollars and the percentage of the budget that we're investing in providing housing. So looking at that as an opportunity. really expanding the homeownership support, um, expanding homeownership support in a way that incentivizes cooperative ownership and joint ownership of properties. We've been looking at and discussing limited equity housing co-ops as a vehicle that the people can use to organize or own properties, land trusts, and other things that we've been talking about it as far as organizing. And then again, I don't have an issue with promoting and supporting public-private partnerships, but it has to be a true partnership where the return on the investment favors the public and not so heavily favor the private market, like this recent, historic gas plant deal, where it was, just heavily weighted in favor of the private sector and the public. Uh, I'm prayerful that we will, but I'm, not confident because when you start calculating and counting developers they've always done, this is kind of more of the same, and so being cautiously optimistic, but knowing that it's going to take grassroots efforts, us organizing and really having these conversations on the ground level, being more involved not only with the city council elections, but countywide, because the county right now is, in play for the approval of this historic gas plant. But how many of us know or can name, our county commissioners, right? Also, I think there's advisory boards and these community groups that are subject matter experts, but they're heavily weighted, by, those who have that corporate mindset or market-driven mindset and not the community or the public side of these partnerships. And so us involving ourselves and really understanding the points of power, the points of influence, and knowing that there are boards that if we get enough of us on, we can start making recommendations that'll move this in the direction that we want it to go. But it is going to be, a fight, but we're here for it. Like, we don't get everything that we fight for, but everything that we've gotten was a fight. So we just have to continue to push.
Thank you. And Emmanuel, I was wondering if you, hearing what the panelists say, if you have anything you'd like to add.
I think I'll just co-sign everything that Councilmember Mohammed and Carla have said. Policy, and it kind of goes against what I said at the beginning. Policy is the avenue for getting this done, but policy alone, they're not going to do it on their own. No, even the most progressive ones aren't going to do it on their own unless they're pushed to it, and unless the community is demanding these things. But
and if I could,
absolutely.
if we can just vibe on it. And one of the things too, what I'm seeing as an elected official is even when you have council members like myself and like Council Member Floyd, who's very progressive and really pushing, it's a democratic process. So we find ourselves sometimes on the losing side of a majority vote.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean when we talk about the, really engaging in the process, because, when you advance the policy, if it's 2 of us out of 8, you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, we need another 3 of us. And so us as community saying, okay, we unite with these values, we're going to identify candidates who unite with these values and then put them in a position to be able to execute this is the other part of it. So even when you have those politicians, sometimes it's just not enough of us on the body to be able to move it and advance it. Like the referendum on the stadium, like we proposed it, we advocated for it, but we didn't have the supermajority that was needed in order for it to even become a conversation. So it's those types of things that, you're excited about as a candidate when you're running for office, but when you get in office and you realize, like, we got this great idea, the community's behind it and they're supporting it, but your colleagues don't support it or they don't endorse it, and then it fails on the dais, sometimes it can let the wind out of your sails if you're not careful. And so I hear that in Unite With. I just wanted to add that caveat that it does require enough people on the board that think like us in order to do it.
Yeah, and I 100% agree. I'll add the other thing too about the democratic process is that it's not just, it doesn't end when a policy passes or fails in council or in the state legislature or in Congress. There are multiple other layers to this, and so there's other entry points to affect change. It may not be the change you want. It may not get you to the guaranteed or inclusive housing, but there's public comment periods, there's other rules and regulations, there's other touch points to kind of move the needle a little bit more in the right direction. So I'll add that too.
Carla, is there anything you'd like to add as well?
Just that, like, yeah, like, I think you kind of alluded to this, like, feeling defeated after, you know, we lose something, because that happens a lot.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
we're not that
We're in
organized, but I
control,
think, like,
yeah.
we need to look at things as with the corporate class, the landlord class, like, as kind of like a push pull. Like, we're in a class war essentially, and it's like they're 1 point for them. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
I mean, they are
It's an
winning.
ongoing
They are
and protracted
yes,
struggle,
and
yeah.
it's just gonna keep going. Like, we've built this whole movement in St. Pete around rent control. They ban it. And then it's like, what are we gonna do?
Yeah.
Like, we never can give up. Like, we just have to keep building this and keep thinking, like, what's our next move then? And like, try to think of their next move and try to be strategic about it. Like, you know, not just giving up on the policy of rent control, because we need rent control. We still need rent control, and we can't give up on that. Like, it's like, are we going to do a ballot referendum, a statewide ballot referendum? Like, what are we going to do? Like that, and I think we really need to stay with that mindset no matter what happens, not even just in the housing fight, but in the fight for public education, in the fight to end food deserts, just like all of these things. Like, these bad things are happening, but we need to keep building the movement and keep fighting no matter what.
Absolutely, and I think another part of that I had here was really having like a community watchdog, and I appreciate the work that the tenants union does in this area, but really, like, you know, really being dedicated to watching the housing trends and seeing, like, bringing things to us. When the law passed about, you know, criminalizing homelessness in the state, having, you know, community groups to say, okay, well, are you seeing how many people are being arrested? Do you see what the impact of that is, you know, on Pinellas County? And having, you know, groups that are keeping their eye on the ball, making sure that the policies that we're recommending are right and exact for what we need to be doing to advance this part of the game. Because again, as an elected official, just, you know, an experience that I've had and just watching my colleagues, there's a lot of things that you just don't know. And having community groups to be able to bring it to you, you know, is very important. And then knowing that you have not only the subject matter expertise of that group, but you also have the organizing prowess of your community behind you, so that you're not up there, you know, like the Lone Ranger, and people are like, what you talking about, Willis? You know, it has been very helpful and supportive. But again, you know, it takes 5 votes to get it done. And so being mindful of that. And of course, you know, never giving up. I unite with that for sure. Continuing to have that community engagement, doing things like we're doing here, to be able to talk to the community directly, engaging around it. I think also streamlining processes for those who are building affordable housing and creating units. So maybe reducing the time and the cost associated with the permitting process, or when you have projects that are explicitly affordable for the demographics that we're talking about, because, you know, you got this whole affordable
The
for you,
AMI,
the whole AMI conversation. But when you have projects that are in line with our stated value to provide affordable housing, like being able to move them ahead in the queue and not drag them along, you know, so that it takes, you know, forever to get these things built, is another one of the ways, or another opportunity that I see that can be, you know, leveraged from an administrative standpoint. To say, hey, if we have, you know, an affordable project in the queue next to a market rate project, we're going to prioritize the affordable project and move it forward in a way that makes sense and that's strategic, is another one of the opportunities that I see. So,
Excellent. Well, this conversation that we're having here to engage the community, uplift this information about these important policies we need. I hope that folks got something important from this conversation. I heard a lot of things that I don't think are commonly known that are brought up. There's a lot of obviously advocates concerned about this in the community, so we're looking forward to continuing to engage the community,
continuing to build on this and to have some real victories. But I just wanted to thank everybody. Thank Aaron for zooming in from California. Thank you, Carla, for being here, and St. Pete Tenants Union. Thank you, Councilmember John Muhammad, for being here. And thank you to Liberation Generation and Emmanuel for hosting and funding this event and the work that's been happening over the past few months. And thank you for Tampa Bay Breakfast Club for hosting us and putting us on their spot, so that their audience
redefining what's cool, right?
So yeah, and so so we'll be back in the future, and stay tuned. Look out for those terms: guaranteed housing, inclusive housing. It's an idea as time has come. Thank you.
Thank you.